This is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes. Today's episode is number 342, and my next guest is from Manitoba, and he's going to teach you how to become the pirate. Now, you're probably wondering, what the hell, Rob? Become a pirate in today's day and age? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. So I want to welcome Ben Pritchett, and thanks for being here. And your bookshelf is just amazing.
Well, thanks for having me there, Rob. Yeah, well, this is a fraction of my books, as a matter of fact. This is probably about 1/10 of them here. The rest are all out in another room. They're what I call my library. And I should also say I'm living in Manitoba now, but I'm originally from Newfoundland, so maybe that might have something to do with
Everybody's turning it off now.
yeah, but the pirate thinking, it's it was kind of a philosophy. I used to drive a lot between my wife's an optometrist, so we have two clinics that were 500 kilometers apart, so 300 miles for your Americans watching there. And I would drive that late at night, just mainly because I don't, you know, my biggest concern with driving on the highway is the other drivers sort of thing. So late at night, no one was there, so I would drive this route, and we're going through northern Manitoba or central North Manitoba, whatever you want to call it. I think my record was only saw 27 other vehicles one night in a 300-mile drive. And so at the time I was watching Black Sails. I don't know if you're familiar with that show or not, but I kind of got thinking, we become entrepreneurs oftentimes because we don't like rules.
Mhm.
And you think back to the pirate age, why did a lot of people become pirates? Because they didn't want to follow the rules. I mean, a lot of pirates were, formal naval officers, this sort of thing, or people who broke away. And what did they do? They basically, once they got out on a ship, a lot of these ships, amazing enough, were run almost like democracies. I mean, they voted for the captain, they voted for the first officer, sort of thing. And then once they got that in their plans, they basically did whatever the hell they wanted.
Mhm.
And with few exceptions, I mean, basically government regulations and trying to deal with our ever-loving bankers, an entrepreneur basically does what they want within reason. So my whole thing I came up with the pirate philosophy was basically you take whatever you want and let your competition fight over what's left. And
Yeah.
that's how it came to be. So any of your listeners who are entrepreneurs will probably get that.
One for me, it was people say, Rob, there's rules in doing things. And I'm like, rules? What rules? Nobody told me the rules. Why are there rules? And and I've been kind of living that philosophy for the last 30 years. I mean, since I started my first company in 1995. So, 30 years as an entrepreneur, not really listening to what the rules were, because to me, this is my business. I'll conduct it how I want. And people are like, Rob, you can't treat clients like that. Well, they're wrong. I can do whatever I want.
Absolutely. Well, and I actually started my first business at the ripe old age of 15. And it was a case of, well, first of all, I have hay fever. So what do a lot of young boys do? And when they're in their teens, they mow lawns or whatever in the summertime.
Hmm.
Did not work for me. I would mow my own, and that was about it. I wasn't going to do anybody else's. And, what else could you do? I don't know if you guys had those Dickie D's, the ice cream cart where you rode the bike and you had a little cart in front of you with the cooler and stuff. That was
We
another
had the
summer
carts. I
job.
didn't know what they were called.
Yeah, it was a Dickie D was the brand name up here anyway. I don't know if that was down in the States or not, but I mean this was hard bloody work. I mean
I think
in
down here
Newfoundland.
they're probably good humor or something like that.
There you go. Well, see, so we had very humid summers in Newfoundland. The
Hmm.
summer was short, but when we did have summer, I mean it was easily 100 degrees for 6, 7 weeks straight once it got humid and hot and everything. And the idea of riding around on that bike didn't appeal to me that much either. So I had a teacher back in grade 7 who was very well known for tying salmon flies. And of course, we got salmon rivers all over the place back home on the rock there. So I went and learned how to tie salmon flies, not because I was interested in fishing, but you could make a fly for 15 or 20 cents and sell it for $1.
Hmm.
So I learned how to tie flies in order to go out and make money that way. So I could sit in the wintertime and had a little black and white television sitting in the corner because I'm freaking old. and I would sit there with my vise and I would make salmon flies, and I was able to make probably about 10, 11, 12 bucks an hour sitting home watching the tube. I then in the spring, you don't get your driver's license till 17 back home. So
Mhm.
when I was 15, 16 years old, I had to get my mother to drive me. We had what we called the loop. So you would leave Gander, Newfoundland, where I grew up, and you go all down around the coast and you'd arrive back in Gander. And I'd go out and sell 1,000, 1,500 bucks, 2,000 bucks worth of salmon flies in a weekend. And then while my buddies were out mowing lawns and driving around ice cream carts, I was sitting in my room reading a book because I already made my summer money. So that was kind of how I got my start in doing things my way, as it were. And even when I went to college, most kids went out and got a summer job doing regular things. I sold vacuum cleaners and carpet, commission sales. So
Mhm.
I made more, and then anyone knows anything about Newfoundland will know that our reason for being was the cod fishery from 1497 on. Well, due to overfishing and whatnot, our cod fishery shut down when I was in college in 1989 or 90. So when I graduated in 1991, you can imagine if your economy is based on one thing and is gone, jobs were not very plentiful.
Mhm.
And I had my grandfather had passed away in 89. I had my grandmother and my mother to take care of. So I was like, uh, anyone who reads management books, Peter Drucker is quite famous, and one of Drucker's axioms was incongruity. If there's something should be there but isn't, maybe there's an opportunity to fill. So almost pirate thinking there too. If there's an opportunity, go grab it, sort of thing.
Mhm.
And I had just spent 2 years learning how to write business plans. So I said, great, I'll start writing business plans because if they can't go fish, they got to start doing something else. And I did that. I did advertising. Like we didn't have Valpak home, and I said, well, that can't be all that hard. So I went and taught myself rudimentary graphic design,
Mhm.
and believe me, rudimentary is being very kind to myself because it was crap. But I taught myself how to do it. I went around to all the local businesses. I sold the ads. I designed the ads, and took it to the print shop, got it printed. I pick it up on a Friday afternoon and you should have seen my house. I con all my friends to come over for popping sandwiches, and we put an 8 foot table in the middle of the living room, and we would follow each other around with a stack of coupons. I had my mother and grandmother set up in the dining room with those little roller spongy doohickeys, and we would stuff 75,000 coupons into 6,000 envelopes in a weekend. Take them to the post office Monday morning, and then it came the fun time of collecting my fees, which I'm sure as an entrepreneur you've experienced that one a few times.
Oh
It,
yeah,
it,
I've stuffed envelopes. I've done the gamut, especially when I had the carpet cleaning business.
yep.
We were
So
designing postcards, staying them out, and then putting stamps on everything. I'm like, oh God, there's got to be a better way.
yeah.
But it's funny because I'm listening to you and all the skill sets that you learned when you were younger. Not only are you implementing them now in the vision centers, but you just bought a printing company. So it's kind of like you going full circle.
It is the only thing now, as I tell you, I have the business I've bought. We do postcards, and we also do a magazine, 20 to 24 pages of advertising.
Mhm.
The humongous difference here is that this is a quasi franchise. So there's a company in Ontario that does all the printing, all the distribution. So unlike back in the day when I did everything, now I sell it. They do everything else in between. I collect the money at the end. So it's a much nicer process as
Well,
far as
it's
I'm
if
concerned.
you think about it, it's still pirate thinking. You're getting other people to do the work that you don't want to do.
Well, and not only that, they do it much cheaper than I do because they do what they know how to do, do what I know how to do, sort of thing, right?
Yeah. But 20, 20 you say 22 years, almost 23 years in the Vision Center. That's a lifetime of learning. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. You expanded,
Oh,
maybe you curtailed a little bit, and then COVID hit. And then it's like, wow. So how'd you stay busy?
Well, it's kind of crazy to have the learning part of things. So we actually got into this business, yeah, it was July of 2003, and we bought the first two clinics, the ones we still own today, and from a family member of my wife's. And part of the deal was that they were going to come in and basically teach us the business. And he got something that I didn't even know existed at the time. He got buyer's remorse after the deal
Mhm.
was sold and actually became quite aggressive against us, led to a lawsuit and all sorts of fun stuff. So we got thrown into the deep end. Over $500,000 in debt in an industry I knew nothing about, and I had to learn it all from scratch, basically. Um, but one of the things that I've definitely learned is that I'm going to say at least 80, maybe 90% of business is the same. The 10 or 20% is your nuances specific to the industry. The rest of it, I mean, bookkeeping is the same no matter what you're doing. Marketing is relatively the same. Merchandising, it's all these things you learn. So then you got the little specifics in the middle. I mean, the spider in the woodpile for optometry, of course, is it's very difficult to do without an optometrist. So you do have dependence on that skill set. Um, I mean, depending, we did own one practice that probably had over half its prescriptions came from outside the office, just because it was a clinic that was very well known for having unique product there, so people would bring their prescriptions in from elsewhere. But otherwise, I like to say we eat what we kill. If we don't produce a script, we don't sell the glasses. Simple as that, right? So, so yeah, we got in there and we learned it, and certainly lots of ups and downs, and then yeah, COVID came along, and uh, to this day, I'm still baffled by the fact that our governments were able to just go in and shut down private enterprise, say, "Oh, lock your door."
Mhm.
And again, I don't know for sure how everything worked in the States, but I know certainly here in Canada, everything was done to protect the big banks. So, they came out with the checks that so you keep paying your bills. Well, the bills you're supposed to keep paying with the bank. And
Mhm.
and all the banks were your friend too, because they would let you skip a few mortgage payments or skip a few car payments. And what people didn't realize till after the fact is they just took them and tacked them on the back end. So you save 3 grand a day and it costs you 10 grand over the next 25 years.
Mhm.
That sort of foolishness. Um, but if you were in a spot, for example, that, so you're paying rent and, there's a mortgage in place, well, there was help to pay that. If you were a little mom and pop who had paid the building off and this was your retirement income, there was no supports. It was only if there was a mortgage and stuff like that. So the things that were done, the dirty little things that were done behind the scenes that only protected the humongous banks and left the little guy out. Like we own a commercial building that one of our clinics in, but it's a private mortgage. Well, that didn't count for any supports and this sort of thing. So, so we were locked down for 7 weeks in this province. And, we're sitting there and I'm watching equipment leases going out the door every day. I mean, we were bleeding a grand or two every single day. We were shut down.
Mhm.
And then at the end of it, of course, the government was, oh, we'll give you a loan.
Yeah.
And it was a loan. I mean, they did write part of it off, but before we were back on our feet, you had to pay it back in full. And so there's really, there was a big gaping hole in revenue that just was never filled, never will be filled. And then, of course, all around the world, we printed money like it was going out of style. So we had 3 minimum wage increases in 16 months in this province. And at one point, we had the Bank of Canada governor, which is the same as your Fed chairman down there.
Mhm.
One of his lieutenants came through here and gave a speech, and he blamed entrepreneurs for inflation because we raised prices. And I'm like, so every single one of our expenses went up, but we weren't supposed to change our prices. This is where, I mean, a true part, I guess we could have just shot the guy and hung him from the yardarm sort of thing, but there are some rules we do have to follow, even if we think like pirates,
Right.
But yeah,
And
it was a crazy time.
you raise, you raise the question for all entrepreneurs, should you raise your prices? And I always tell people, yes, yes, you should raise your price. In fact, if you're going back, and I'm using myself as an example, in 1998, at the at that point, I had already been in the cleaning business for 3 years. And my slogan was, "We clean your carpet, not your wallet." My prices were so low, all I was attracting was low-paying clients. And those low-paying clients had the dirtiest carpets because they could never afford to have them cleaned frequently. And so I was just spinning my wheels. But the moment I raised my prices, and I raised them, I think that year, 35%, right off the top, I started attracting better types of clients. I started to attract people that, didn't have the dirty carpets. In fact, I ended up cleaning clean carpet because the people thought it was dirty, but they just wanted it cleaned again and again. And so I would service these people multiple times a year. It was like, wow, not only did I raise my price, but things got easier. And I
Right.
and yesterday I watched as someone went into somebody's post on Facebook and tried to tell them that one, their prices were too high, they are ripping people off, that they could do it for a third or you know a third or more for a less price, and cut the time down in half. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're telling people that you're faster, better, even cheaper, yet you're doing it in a way that insults the person that, I'm like, why couldn't you have done this differently? Why did you have to try to prove your point that you were cheaper, faster, better by undermining somebody else? And here's the
Well,
problem. Entrepreneurs do it all the time, but focus on yourself. Just-
we get that all the time in our industry. This is one of the things with raising prices that can be problematic. I mean, we're very commoditized, as you can imagine. I mean, glasses are and the industry did it to itself because what people discovered back in the 80s, because prior to the 80s, there wasn't really much fashion in
Mhm.
glasses. I mean, you see, everyone
Oh
wore
yeah,
the
I
same
look
brand.
back at my pictures. I'm like, God, what am I wearing?
So what happened in the 80s, of course, was we started getting brand name frames and brand name that and different styles and stuff. So a lot of people in their heads now is glasses are a fashion accessory, no different than a pair of shoes or something.
Mhm.
So why can't you buy them online or at some mass store, this sort of thing? So, so one of the big things is, and if any of your listeners out there, for example, have ever bought online, one of the things you have to get to buy glass online is something called your PD, which is your pupillary distance, which basically is where your pupils are in terms of the glasses.
Mhm.
And we get people pissed off at us all the time because we don't give out PDs. We don't sell the PD because the PD is unique to each pair of glasses in reality. So, it's like, for example, I can show you this is one of my computer glasses I have here. As you can see, those are hopefully you guys can see that, two very different size lenses.
Mhm.
So the PD is going to be different in them both, where your eye sits when you're wearing them. And so we get people all the time will go on Facebook or whatever, and they'll complain about our offices for not giving out the PD. And I try to explain to people, you've got a company, they operate in the States and here in Canada called Zenni.
Mhm.
And Zenni, at one point, you could get three pairs of glasses for something like $35 delivered. I'm part of a buying group. Our buying group does over $1 billion a year in purchasing power. I cannot produce a pair of glasses for $35. One pair. These
Mhm.
guys are selling three pairs. What do you think they're selling you? So I go out, I've even seen, because my wife specializes in pediatrics. She's probably seen more kids than anyone else in the province. And and you get sometimes the parents say, oh, my kid is hard on glasses, so I don't want to put good money into it, so I buy them online.
Mhm.
Well, they did tests a few years back. A bunch of optometry professors, mainly in the US, got together, threw a bunch of their own money in a pot, so it would be totally independent. They went and bought glasses from all the different online retailers, and they sent them to an independent lab for blind testing, basically. So they had double, triple blinds set up so this could not be rigged. And they found that one in four lenses either had a wrong prescription or failed North American safety standards. Now, 1 in 4, you got two in front of your face. So the two of us here now have four lenses, which means if we bought online, at least one of our lenses is likely to have a problem with it.
Hmm.
Now, what does North American safety standards mean? The main thing is, and I don't even think this is a correct word, but people understand when I say it, is shatterproofness.
Mm.
So you go out and you save your kid some money, or you save yourself some money, not your kid, because you're cheap, and your kid gets a puck in the case of Canada, maybe a baseball in the case of the U.S. in the eye, and the lens shatters and takes their eye out. What did you just save?
Yeah.
And you try to explain that to people, and a lot of people get it, but it's amazing. There is probably that 1 in 4, 1 in 5. When I've explained that to them, and I don't embarrass them in public, I'll private message them when it's somebody that I know, and they'll come back. Well, I don't care. It's just too expensive,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so one of the things that we did in the face of rising inflation and whatnot, because our two clinics are pretty rural, and it's very interesting. One of them, the one is up north of here. I mean, we have social services, welfare recipients, if you will. We have a fairly high indigenous population, and they're middle class at best, lower middle class for the most part. So they do have limited buying power. So the biggest thing for me is I've gone out and I've negotiated deals with the frame companies and with the lens company. God bless you. And I try to make sure it's like there's an old axiom in stock market investing. You don't make money when you sell the stock, you make it when you buy it.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing. I have my margin. There's a certain percentage margin I want to make. So I make sure that everything fits and I have all the different price points. As I used to put it years ago in one of our other clinics where we had street people, even were regulars at one of our clinics. As you can imagine, they only got what welfare would buy.
Hmm.
And I grew up in a fairly poor as a kid, as a single parent family and whatnot. And I always said, I will not have a mom have to decide between milk on the table or glasses on their kid's face. So I've always made sure I have product on my shelves that fits every price point. So that's one of the other things too. I mean, if you're in the correct market, you can go out and say, well, here's my price and my price. I'm up here, take it or leave it. Or you can choose to meet them. The only thing is, if you want to make sure you keep your doors open and your staff paid, you got to make sure you buy right before you sell at a price that matches everybody's need. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, and here's and you and I have been in the marketing field for a long time. We've learned from the greats like Dan Kennedy and some of the others, and so we understand, emotional buying.
Hmm.
But as an entrepreneur, you also have emotional selling. And that comes in play when you have bills to pay, when you have people to, your employees that need money. And so you start taking on all these jobs, or you try to figure out, okay, how can I best serve this customer? If I can drop my price, what services can I remove that they can afford? And it's kind of like saying or asking, what is your budget? And when you start asking that, which is the wrong question, your brain starts thinking, okay, how can I make this work? And now you're busy busting your ass to try to create busy work where you're not really making any money. But businesses do it all the time because they think that's what you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
But a pirate would just say, uh, you know what? This is my price. Take it or leave it.
Well, the title I've given myself for many, many years is I say I'm a capitalist with a conscience. So I do want to maximize my profits, but not at the expense of leaving anyone else in the dust, sort of thing. So in that perspective, maybe I'm not quite a true pirate, but
Well,
it,
and the thing is that we all want to be heroes to our clients. We all want to come in and, swoop down and save the day, but we can't always be heroes. Not at the
no,
expense of ourselves.
exactly. It's interesting. Winnipeg, of course, is known as being very cheap, partially because if you actually look at a map, Winnipeg is the geographic center of North America. We're literally right smack dab in the middle of Canada, and if you go north south, we're just over the border from the U.S. We're smack dab in the center there too. So we have a lot of uh, um, distribution out of here. So Like when you fly into Winnipeg Airport, there's a whole section that you just drive, all you see is tractor trailers
Hmm.
and the lots down below, sort of thing. So because of that, there's a lot of wholesale outlets here,
Hmm.
and so Winnipeg has this, everyone's cheap here mentality, sort of thing. So a few years back, I was at a frame show in New York, and we actually had some. They were handmade Italian frames of Indian water buffalo horn.
Wow.
And you never, unless you knew the material, you would not have known that they actually looked like a high-end plastic or an acetate. You had no idea it was bone unless someone told you. And these things were my landed cost around $500. Now that frame would normally sell for over $1,000. I'm like, well, I can't quite go there. But the reason I brought them in was a red herring too, because I put them out at 995 plus lenses, and then that made my $600 or $700 frames look a lot cheaper.
Hmm.
And mind you, the same store these are in, I had $99 frames. So we went from $100 right up to $1,000. And we barely had these things put out before my manager called me up and he says, well, we sold one of those Italian frames. I said, no kidding. And I said, what was the use, sort of thing? He said he put driving lenses in it. So it was a special coated lens for driving. So this guy spent $1,500. And this was 12 or 13 years ago. So this would be like 2 grand, $2,300 or something today, for a pair of glasses he was going to leave in his car.
Hmm.
Yet everyone's always telling me Winnipeggers are cheap. They won't spend on anything. I said, depends on if they want it. And of course, you mentioned Dan Kennedy. I mean, one of his newsletters for years was, marketing to the affluent. So he always said, the mass affluent, there are certain people that have got the money to spend, sort of thing, right? But that's an excellent example. Another great one that I always love is we used to have a lens called the Ipsio, which was a fairly customized lens. It was made out of a factory in Portugal, the only place in the world they made them. You had to have a special machine that did a bunch of extra measurements to the eyes and everything. And this was 17 years ago, I think. At the time, we used to sell that lens for $1,000. Uh, Plus, basically, as long as you can go to the super premium frames, any frame you want it with it for $1,000. And there was a story one day where this girl came in with her mom, and they were both wearing, how would I put this? Not fashionably torn jeans. Like they were basically, and believe me, I don't think torn jeans are fashionable in any set, but these are obviously just old pants, sort of thing, and a t-shirt. And the mom was wanting to treat herself, and she actually, was being shown the Ipsio lens, and I guess the daughter says she was like, "Well, mom, you can't afford that." Mom whipped out a debit card, not a credit card, a debit card. She paid cash, not a deposit, the entire amount, the whole grand, right on it, sort of thing. And I said to my sales rep at the time when he's telling me this story, I said, "Did you give the kid a pat on the back because the kid made the sale for you because mom didn't want to be shown up by the kid."
Hmm.
But again, it's a good example of talking about sales psychology and whatnot. Like when I go car shopping, I wear a shabby old pair of sweats and a t-shirt because I'm always curious to see how the staff will treat me.
Hmm.
The reality is, I know I can walk, well, maybe not, a Jaguar or something, but I can walk onto almost any car lot out there, and if I want it, I'm going to get approved for it. I can drive
Hmm.
away that day, sort of thing. But I'm always curious to see how they treat you if they don't think you have money.
Yeah. Yeah. And but it also, I think when we judge people like that, and I do this all the time with homeless people. Heck, yesterday we were driving through the city and this person had a sign and something about being homeless. And I looked. My wife's like, "Should we stop and give him money?" I said, "No." She says, "Why?" I said, "His clothes are too nice." It's like he hasn't been homeless long enough. I mean, he
Yeah.
probably just got home and got dressed and came out with a sign. And so yeah, we do judge people, and we do visually look at them and say, can they afford us, or maybe they can actually afford too much. And so I think it's good sometimes where we can go into a car lot and not feel like we're being targeted, you know. But people do that to us all the time. Just
Hmm.
you said the lady spent a lot of money. But here's the thing is that, you know, we can have our prices high enough. that the people that really want our service will pay for it, and they'll whip out a debit card or they'll pay cash, and to them it's nothing.
Yep.
And yet, I think when I first started, I felt guilty charging high prices. I wanted to be that person that was just fair to my clients. And I know that's a philosophy that everybody has out there. But fair doesn't pay your bills. Fair doesn't give you a nicer car. Fair doesn't give you vacations. And isn't that what we really started our business for? So we could have nicer things, so we could have a retirement, so we could take vacations. That business needs to fund our personal life, not our personal life funding our business.
That's
And
right.
that,
Well, I
and
think,
if you go, that is a pirate life right there.
I mean, we can all have, I mean, altruistic tendencies, but if that's all that's driving you, then yeah, it's going to drive you out of business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you watch that show that comes on CNBC called American Greed. And I was watching one of those episodes interesting recently, which was about a product called Juul, Juul, which was one of the first vaping
Oh yeah.
products.
Hmm.
And they originally claimed they got into it because they wanted to get people away from the scourge of nicotine and cancer and whatnot. But then all their marketing was aimed at kids.
Hmm.
They had all these special flavored products, and all of a sudden they were billionaires. And then of course it came out and proved on the inside that of course they knew exactly what they were doing because they were getting rich off of it, right? Um, but every time they were interviewed was all about saving people while they were lining their own pockets, sort of thing, right?
Hmm. Yeah. So how do people find you? Where do they go? Besides going up to Manitoba.
Honestly, it's interesting. I have almost no digital footprint per se. I mean, most of what I do is outbound. I mean, even my clinics. I mean, my clinics don't have a website right now, um, just because we've got a large base of clients. I mean, to the point that we haven't even we our main thing was postcards. Like people have their eye exams done roughly every 27 months, mainly because of the insurance cycle, which is every 24 months they're covered. And so we basically did postcards for years, and we got so backlogged during COVID that we've only probably sent out a couple of thousand postcards since 2020, just because we hit one or two dry spells. We drop a few in the mail. Um, my advertising business is all totally outbound. People don't really come looking for me. So yeah, finding me is not that easy, to be honest with you.
And the
Uh,
thing is that it showcases people that you can become a real life pirate. You don't need to advertise as much. You don't need to have a website. And it's ironic because I help people with their digital marketing so that they can be seen, so that they can have authority and credibility. And you don't want to be seen, and yet you still have authority and credibility. So, it all goes back to this pirate mentality. And you're doing things by your rules, and you're being successful with it. And now I'm not saying, not having a website is not for everyone, but there are people that can do it. And you just proved that you can do it very well.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, we just built a small one for my wife's her specialty, which is vision therapy. Working with kids, with learning disabilities and whatnot. We have to add to it because she also does work with traumatic brain injury patients and whatnot, helping them relearn their visual system. We've had one up for years, which was just it was actually pretty funny. We threw it together about 6, 7 years ago. She was being interviewed on a morning show for one of the local TV stations, and they said, "Well, make sure you have a URL for us because we're going to put it up," sort of thing. So our mutual friend Paul, he actually helped me put it together. We worked our butts off for like 72 hours straight and built a website. She did the interview and they didn't put the damn URL up on it after all. So we almost killed ourselves getting her a website and it never got promoted. But it's been sitting there all this time. We get maybe, because I guess someone hears her name or maybe they search something and sat there long enough now. She gets probably three or four half decent inquiries, per month, people interested in it. So we're now upgrading that and we've just, put a quiz on there and a few things like that. Um, I mean, like for me, the franchise has a site. I mean, the direct mail business, but I'm not even specifically on there. I don't think so. I just send people there if they want a better understanding of what I do. Now, I do plan on building a website out in the not too distant future. Like I named the company Western Publishing Corp because, I'm in Western Canada, and hopefully I'll expand beyond that. But the website is not built yet, unfortunately. But we'll get there in part because I want to have my own mailing list and whatnot too. So, um,
Now,
that
now being in Canada, can you do mailing for U.S. companies?
very difficult at this point. Apparently, they do partner. Like if a Canadian company wanted to do something through me, I can get their ad in a Valpak package down there.
Hmm.
But it's very difficult having stuff go over the border. Like I remember when I first started going to Dan Kennedy events, that was probably close to 20 years ago. And they'd be up there and they had the oversized postcards, for example. And I was like, oh, geez, that's cool. And then you'd see the 3D mailer guys, they're mailing out pill bottles with a letter shoved in a pill bottle sort of thing, right? And it's like, oh, that's so freaking cool. And I came back and I went to the post office, and I think 5x7 was the biggest postcard you were allowed to mail here at the time. And oh no, we couldn't mail a pill bottle. We had to just put it in a box, and you pay like package rate. So it would have been like $12 to send a pill bottle, that sort of thing. And I just was like, holy crap, man! There's all these cool things we can do. I remember even I was actually in the Renegade Millionaire Mastermind this past year, and Darcy Juarez is, well, I'm sure you're familiar with Darcy. She was leading it, and she was talking about one of the really successful ones they did that they got in trouble for was it was a wanted poster. This was for, I think, for a super conference. It came out in a tube, and so the wanted poster, and there was a 50 caliber bullet, obviously not live, but in the tube. And I guess they got in all sorts of crap for doing that one. And I have the bullet is sitting on my shelf over here right now, like over a decade later, because I thought that was just such a cool promotion. And I'm thinking, yeah, if they had trouble sending that in the States, you couldn't live long enough in Canada to ever put that in the mail.
Well, I occasionally I'll mail some of my books. I don't even mail them through my own post office anymore because it's just a hassle to send them to Canada or even to the UK. I'll send them through Amazon, and because they give me the tracking. I just sent one to somebody in Lethbridge, which is in Canada,
Alberta, yeah.
Alberta. Yeah, and I guess Amazon then swapped it over to Dragonfly, which is I guess the preferred shipper there, and they kept me in the loop, which was pretty cool. I was getting emails. We're 15 feet away from your customer. We just dropped it off. We got a signature. I'm like, this is pretty cool. I'd send
Yeah,
something
pretty
to
much.
I sent something to the UK, and whatever shipper they were using there, they lost it. And I sent another one. They lost that one. I'm like, I'm gonna lose money on this deal. So I finally sent a third book, and they got it. No tracking whatsoever. The customer finally said after 2 weeks of waiting, "Oh yeah, I finally got your book. Thanks." And I'm like, you know, I'm not saying I wish everybody was like Amazon, where they take a picture and show you and track everything. But the U.S. Postal Service is horrible, and I don't know how your postal service is, but I'm glad for the shippers that actually keep people in the loop.
Well, they have their issues, there's no doubt. I mean, that actually, Canada Post, of course, it is a crown corporation up here, so I mean, it is owned by the government, so it's totally unionized. I had an uncle of mine actually worked at the counter at the post office back home in Gander. I mean, as a good example, how many adult men do you know who want to be a cashier? Not very many, but adjusted for inflation, if you're making 60 grand a year with a pension and insurance, most of us would probably consider standing behind a cash register. But that's where it's become unrealistic because it's a government job. It's paid beyond what it should be, which is why our rates are so stupid. Like
Hmm.
it's a $1.25 for a first class stamp in Canada right now. So I'll give you one of the examples, like with our postcards. that we used to send out, hey, it's time for your eye exam. When we got into the business, stamps were like 60 cents. So you take your stamp, you take your postcard, you take your staff time to run off the address label and all that stuff. You were putting a postcard in the mail for $1.
Hmm.
Now it's two. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, I used to do probably between my offices 1,500 pieces a month, probably like that. Well, that's $3,000 now. So
Hmm.
I look at it and I said, you know what else I could do? I can send out an unaddressed postcard to every friggin' address in the little towns that I'm in there and the surrounding communities, 5,000 pieces at a time
For
for
cheaper.
less than a few hundred address ones. So I'm like, friggin', I'm just going to remind everybody they should get an eye exam. I'll just send it out to the whole bunch and see how it goes.
Hmm.
So that's, and they went on strike, for example, our post office went on a strike 6 weeks before Christmas. And now part of the problem is, I do feel some sympathy for the management at the post office, despite the fact they've got all these levels and everything, is they're not a true company insofar as to be able to make a profit because they are mandated to deliver mail to every address in Canada. Well, 80% of our population, I think, or 82 or something, is within an hour of the US border. So you've got less than 20% of the population is in all that north, which is why even when I talk about my more northern clinic, which is like I said, 300 miles from here, is right on the Saskatchewan border. That is still southern Manitoba. We're not even halfway up the province, but we're 3 hours, over 3 hours away from the U.S. border. So can you imagine what it costs to deliver mail up there
Hmm.
versus in the city of Winnipeg, for example? So they've been given a very unenviable task in that they have to meet that requirement. Like if they could cut off the north, Canada Post would be profitable.
Yeah.
They lose their money because of that. I'm sure it's the same deal with U.S. Postal Service. I mean, you start doing all these little rural towns in the flyover states and so on and so forth. There's no way in hell that's as profitable as delivering mail on your street where you are.
Yeah. Well, I live in a rural town, and it's farms all around the Amish
Okay,
farms, and
all right. Well, there you go.
and
So you're one of the ones that costs
yeah,
U.S.
I
Postal
mean,
Service money.
the post people have to have vehicles to drive around just to deliver our mail. Whereas when I used to live in Lancaster City, they have people that walk around and deliver mail because the houses are closer. So it's yeah. I mean, but I'm still not as rural as probably some people. Whereas you don't see a farm, every 15 minutes. So, it's here, it's still everything. I could walk up the street and there's a store. There's a school in back of me. So, you know, yeah, I'm still considered rural, but not as rural as I should, could be, where I want to be. There's still too many people living near me.
Well, I actually live in my town is considered a rural municipality. I'm 3.5 kilometers, so like a little over 2 miles from the edge of Winnipeg. So for me, it's beautiful. Like I'm on a 1.3 acre lot. My neighbors aren't close enough to pass, sugar through the window to them, sort of
Mhm.
crap like that. So I've got my space, but it takes me a whole whopping 5 minutes to be in the city.
Yeah, yeah.
They're gonna have a Costco. They're opening a new Costco in October. It's gonna be about a 12-minute drive from my house. So I get the beauty, the quiet of a small town, but all the amenities of a city is in my backyard, sort of thing, right?
Mhm.
So like to me, that's the best of both worlds. Now we also have up here. I don't know if you guys ever had these down. We have what they call super mailboxes. So like where I am now, down at the end of my street, there's it's almost the same as when you get mailboxes inside the post office. It's just these are kind of sitting there. So
Mm.
that's one of the ways the Canada Post has saved money over the years. So like even smaller packages up to maybe I don't know maybe a foot cube. They
Mm.
have a big box at the bottom, so there'll be a key in my box. Open up the box down below, take my package, drop the key back in.
Yeah,
That
they
sort of
have
thing.
those. They have those in apartment complexes around here, but so that way the postal person just goes to one place, drops the mail, and goes. But yeah, we still have our mailboxes out front, and It's different,
Yeah.
Some.
No, outside the city, there's a lot of places now that don't have the right direct to your home delivery sort of thing. And again, part of the problem we have here is mindset when you're dealing with unions and whatnot is you know Amazon delivers on Saturday and Sunday. And the Canada Post unions are like, well, we don't, if our guys work on a weekend, they got to get time and a half or double time or whatever. Forget the fact that the corporation is losing $1 billion a year. Right? What's $1 billion amongst friends? Right? But yeah, it's a changing market. I mean, one of the things and one of the things that interests me about getting into direct mail now is, we're getting less mail all the time.
Mhm.
So the real estate in your mailbox is actually becoming more valuable. And let's face it, I mean, does most of our junk mail get, put in the circular file cabinet? Absolutely. But you do glance at it before you throw it in there.
Yeah,
And
for me, I don't get as much mail as I used to because everybody wants to email me or send me crap through social, but the mail that I do get, I open, so it's worthwhile to explore going beyond social now and printing, mailables, postcards, letters, whatever else you want to mail, reminder cards, thank yous. Nobody does that anymore. But that's where
well,
you
you talk about going full circle, right? You think about it, if you read books from, the Victorian age or something like the 1800s, 1700s or whatever, uh, getting a piece of mail was a big deal.
Mhm.
And then it became ubiquitous. It became known as junk mail. It got all thrown in the garbage. Now we've come around where getting a handwritten note or something is so unique that you get excited and find it unique again. So we've
Mhm.
gone all the way full circle once again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've even wondered, I don't, although the way they machine mail now probably wouldn't work, but I thought how cool it would be if you could send out a piece of mail, with the wax seal on the back where you put
Oh
your
yeah.
stamp in. But I suspect the way they machine read the mail now would just crack the crap out of it. You wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to
and
buy
that
it.
your letter is going to get scrutinized by some, postal pirate.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very unfortunate you can't do that. Can you imagine how impressive that would be showing up in your mailbox with that seal on the back and everything?
Yeah.
But and I'm sure some of our listeners, if they're younger, they probably don't know what the hell we just talked about. But the way they used to be done back in the day.
Yeah. And for all those that are listening, I want you to understand that, you know, Ben and I have been doing this for a long, long time. We've been entrepreneurs since we were early, at an early age. And we know the power of being a pirate. We know the power of being unique and doing things that maybe are against the rules. But we do it for a purpose, and we do it for to be more successful. And you're never going to get anywhere copying someone else. So until next time, we'll see you guys on the next episode. And go visit Ben, find him. Yes, I know he has a low social footprint, but he's out there. And if you have a podcast, get him on your podcast because he knows what he's talking about. So we'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.
Thanks, Rob.